Well, hey everyone, this episode of The Vinyl Guide is brought to you by AudiofileUSA.com. Check out their new website. Now it's even easier to find the cleanest, excellent, and near-mint vinyl records at AudiofileUSA.com. Whether it's jazz, punk, prog, or math rock, you'll find the cleanest vinyl records at AudiofileUSA.com. And we're also brought to you by GrooveWasher.com. Not just record cleaners anymore, but your one-stop shop for protection for your vinyl collection. Get record cleaners, cleaning fluid, archival quality GrooveGuard record sleeves, stylus cleaning brushes, and heaps more. Ask your local record shop to stock the Groove Washer gear or simply go to GrooveWasher.com. And with that, on with the show.
Hey everybody, this is John Petrucci from Dream Theater. Our brand new album is called A View from the Top of the World. Check it out when you get a chance. You are listening to The Vinyl Guide.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to episode 314 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And my name is Nate. I'm a total record nerd, been a collector for many years, and I'm slightly OCD to the point that I like to ask my musical heroes all sorts of questions regarding the creation of their music and the packaging of that music that changed our lives. Now, today we have on the show Mr. John Petrucci, who you may well know as the founder, songwriter, guitarist of Dream Theater. And if you follow Dream Theater, you'll know they have a brand new album out, A View from the Top of the World. And that album is absolutely stellar. I talked to John today about that record, how it came to be over the course of the pandemic, the creation beyond music, the concept, the vinyl, the packaging, many ultra nerdy factoids that I like to find out when I talk records and music to the legends of the recording industry. And hey, if you like records, music, and collecting, check out some of the other episodes of The Vinyl Guide. Over 300 other episodes and interviews are yours for the listening by simply subscribing or following the Vinyl Guide podcast on your podcast app. Conversations like episode 310 with Alan Parsons talking Beatles, Pink Floyd, and more. Episode 306 with Robbie Krieger of The Doors. Episode 289 with Fred Armisen of Saturday Night Live in Portlandia. We talk records, box sets, and collecting. Episode 266 with Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick. Episode 255 with Andy Partridge of XTC, and literally hundreds more. Simply follow and subscribe to the Vinyl Guide podcast on your podcast app. Scroll through our hundreds of available episodes and enjoy. And with that, let's check out The View from the Top of the World with Mr. John Petrucci of Dream Theater. When I was setting up for the interview today, sometimes, I'll do interviews. Sometimes people show up a bit late, whatever. I'm like, you know what? Right. I know John's going to be bang on the minute because this is a disciplined guy I'm talking to.
That's right. I love that I have that reputation. That's awesome.
So, hey, thanks for coming on the Vinyl Guide and talking to us. In this show, we talk about records. We talk about collectibles. We talk about that sort of thing. I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but just kind of following your career and seeing the sort of interests that you have, I would imagine you're a bit of a music and vinyl nerd. Would that be fair?
You would think. I am definitely a nerd. You got that part right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you mean, do I cherish and love the experience that vinyl brings and kind of, remember the days when that was the only thing that you looked forward to. I was just talking to my wife about this, about a release, hearing about a release, going to the store, going to Tower Records in New York, picking up the album, getting it home. And, you had to wait till you got home to listen to it, open it up, look at the art. So if you're referring to that, then yes, I am definitely a music and vinyl nerd. I'm not as avid, I would say, of a collector or connoisseur, maybe as a lot of other people that I know. But as far as the nerdiness of enjoying the medium, the process, there's nothing quite like it. From the smell to the look. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. I've spoken to quite a few musicians who, when they create a new album, to them, it doesn't feel complete until they actually have a record in their hands.
Yeah, very true.
Does that kind of feel the same way for you as well?
That's absolutely. Yeah, it's just right. It's just kind of this invisible stuff floating through the air in the, that's on the computer, and it files going back and forth. But yeah, until you physically hold, and actually to that end, I haven't physically held the new Drink Theater record yet because my shipment got delayed. So to me, it's not real yet.
Oh my God. See, we've already got them here in Australia. I don't know why they're taking their time with you.
Well, you know what? Normally I would get them. And obviously customers got theirs and everything. But my supply from the label got held up at customs for whatever reason and is on its way. I do have tracking at this point. So I haven't actually physically held the album yet. So it's pretty crazy.
It may be delivered as we speak.
It might be, exactly.
That'd be great.
I am holding my, actually you can't see the headset. I'm holding my 8 string, but I'm not, but I'm not holding the album.
Are you constantly in a state of just playing guitar? Do you walk around the house, like go to the fridge with a guitar strapped to you?
Right. Go to the bathroom with it, everything.
Yeah.
Yard work.
Do you have a toilet guitar? Do you have a guitar that stays in the bathroom for those moments?
No, I don't have that, but that's a good idea. I might have to start that. That's pretty funny. So
let's go back because, I think you and I are probably around the same age, born in the late 60s. Vinyl was a big deal for us. And what you described earlier was the same experience as I had, running around town. Oh my God, is the new Crocus out? Just trying to find whatever albums you could. Right. When you were young, did you have a large record collection? Was that something that you spent a lot of time with? I mean, like I said earlier, it wasn't that big. My parents had a decent sized record collection. Again, not anything crazy. But there were like a lot of interesting things in their collection that were from Chubby Checker to an album actually called Petrucci, which was about the first printer of music in Italy. So, following in their footsteps, I had a bit of a collection, but it wasn't ridiculous. Again, I know so many people that are so avid and have just tremendous record collections, but I didn't go crazy. I imagine your spare hours were spent somewhere between Tower Records and Guitar Center or Sam Ash, whatever it is. Yeah, there was no Guitar Center back then. Yeah, it was the local music store. I mean, in at that time period, for me, I think about like the 80s basically. I mean, I was a kid in the 70s and started playing guitar when I was 12. And then just all the great music that had such a huge impact on my life and eventually on my career and on me as a guitar player all kind of happened in this one period of time. That to me were when the best Rush albums came out and the best Iron Maiden albums and Metallica albums and et cetera came out. And I mean, at that time in my life, all I did was play guitar. I was either playing guitar or listening to records or cassettes. One of the things about back then too, and I know certain people experience this as well. I mean, I know in general, the way music has been supplied to us digitally, the consumption is a lot more sort of passive and it's just, you can listen to stuff really quickly and wherever you are. But I know people still put the time aside to actually listen to music, which is wonderful. But that, I feel like when I was growing up, you kind of didn't have a choice. Like, you kind of made it a thing. I'm going to listen to this album right now, just the same way you would watch a movie or something. Because I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, you didn't have Netflix and everything else. Like, that was like your event. So if I was listening to Hemispheres, I'd listen to Hemispheres. Like that's what I was doing. So I put the time aside doing that. And so that music really got kind of like ingrained in
in me, you know?
Yeah. And the fact that I guess what you call focus time, right? You sit there and you don't have the iPhone going. You're not scrolling on anything. You're looking at the record. You're reading the lyrics.
Yeah,
exactly. Oh my God, there's a message here. Then you're reading the credits. Who mixed it? You know, you're getting familiar with all these names and
looking at the artwork, everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, I guess I can really see the parallels between what you guys are doing now and those moments, because you do take a lot of care in the artwork and the materials and the other aspects beyond just the music of the package.
We do. And in fact, we kind of pretend that those days aren't over and never went anywhere. You know, we still call them records, and we still write an album with the intent of it being listened to as an album. You know what I mean? Like that somebody's going to actually sit down and have a listening session as if they would watch a movie. So there's a flow to the record, to the opening track, to the ebb and flow and dynamics of the song order and everything else. It's all purposeful. And then we put the time into the packaging and the additional art and, all those details. And it takes a lot more effort, a lot more time, and a lot more expense. But, at the end of the day, when people get this stuff, it's like, holy, this is such an experience. And, I have to say that the latest Dream Theater album is our second on Inside Out, like the label that we signed with a few years ago. And Thomas Waver, who runs it, was a longtime Dream Theater fan. We met him the first time we went to Germany back in the early 90s. And they definitely do it right as far as the packaging. Like they pull out all the stops. So, if you happen to be into that deluxe box thing, you're going to get some pretty awesome 40-page book and all this stuff. So it's even better than what I remember, back when I got a Rush album, whatever.
So I know with the music, you guys really focus on the details, and it's just, it's such a rich experience listening to the music. What sort of effort/agony goes into the physical package? Like, okay, we've got the music now. How about the booklet? Sure. What do we do there? Like, what's that process for the band in developing that?
Well, it's a ton of effort. And like you said, sometimes agony. But in the case of the new album, I'll bring that up as an example. We once again worked with Hugh Symes. Speaking of Rush, Hugh obviously did all the Rush album covers, and he's done many, many, many Dream Theater album covers. In fact, most of them. So the process starts with me giving Hugh a call, saying, "Hey, you want to work together again?" And he thankfully says, "Of course." If we don't have an album title yet, that's the first thing we sort of start working on, because he likes to go by album title to kind of get an overall
concept
idea. Yeah, concept. If I have lyrics done, I'll send him that. If I have any sort of music done, I'll send him that. But we'll ultimately start with some initial conversations about the album, the direction, the title, hopefully, if we have it. In the case of the latest album, we didn't have a title yet, so there was a lot of work that was done pre-title. But once we did, then the floodgates started open. And then besides him going into his creative space and presenting ideas, it's also working with the record label as far as knowing what we're going to be offering. What do we have to actually fulfill as far as art? It's not just a 4-panel single album here. It's usually a double album. There's usually a booklet, and a big booklet inside. There's pages to fill. There's LP labels. There's stickers. There's other art that goes into the big deluxe box sets, whatever they may be: posters, postcards, shirts, keychains. Really fan centric items. This year we had a beanie, I think, and a poster, and a sort of slip mat you put on the record player that has graphics when it spins. So all that stuff, we need to have that information so Hugh knows what he needs to supply. And then even with that, there are so many different formats. So every one of those formats, the standalone, just the LP, double LP, the digipack, the jewel case, the LP with the CDs included, and then the deluxe box set with everything in it. So there's a lot of moving parts. Him and I work very closely on all the conceptual stuff. And then he works very closely with the label and their sort of art department and making sure everything is, all the templates and things are delivered properly. And there's a ton of QC going on. Like I can't tell you the amount of times I have to read through the layout and make sure that every lyric, every title, every credit is right. Because, when you make the mistake of I'm sure it's fine, there'll be something that you didn't catch and then you kick yourself.
Yeah.
So it's very intensive. There's a lot of time. But thankfully, I get to work with somebody like Hugh Syme, who's such a creative genius and so great to work with. And we have just great phone conversations, for hours on everything from art and music and, and beyond. And so it's great. It's a big creative part of producing the record, which, I'm glad we're talking about it, because it's not, as a guitar player and member of Dream Theater, I usually talk mostly about guitar and music, but talking about the art is, it's huge.
Well, yeah, it's a big part of the experience, certainly for me and people who enjoy the music on vinyl. That's kind of all part of the experience. There's a lot of pressure in being able to have all those, like you say, moving parts. You got the vinyl, you got the CD digipack, you got the box set, you've got just the streams, but there's artwork for those as well.
Sure.
The website, there's all sorts of accompanying things, all triangulating on this single release date.
Right. Yeah.
And have there been any concepts that sounded great, but when it came to the execution, it was something that just couldn't be done, at least at this point?
Some of those ideas, they'll get talked about, and then they'll sort of be determined before we go to that level, whether or not something could be done. A lot of those do end up happening. For example, there's something on Distance Over Time, the last record on the box, we did, like, I think it's called the lenticular cover, where the skull, depending on how you look at the cover, the skull changes direction. And these are types of things are kind of wish list things that you'll bring up to the label. There's budget that's concerned as well. And it's like, can we do this? How much is it going to cost? Thankfully, it's usually these things, most of the times we're able to do. Some of them are really difficult to pull off, and you don't know if you're going to have an issue or not until something happens. I could remember with the Astonishing package when we were on Roadrunner, they did such a great job working with us and all my crazy ideas for the Astonishing packaging. And one of the things we did is that the box set was actually, it was a box like that came with a 3D printed Nomak, which was this creature from the album concept that had to be like manufactured and hand painted and everything. And it was just like this crazy idea that they said yes to and put it together. But then there ended up being all of these like manufacturing issues, and it got held up, and then it eventually happened, but then you have to communicate with customers saying, this is going to come, and we'll give you this as a you have to kind of mitigate the problem there.
Your Nomak doesn't have a head.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to come, but it's going to be 2 months from now. Please be patient. So sometimes you bite off more than you can chew. But what I love is that what I've noticed is that the record labels and people like in this are really like up for it. Mm-hmm. You work with people that are like into art, into music, into the whole thing, and it's great when you're on the same page and you have these crazy ideas. Oh, can we do this? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. To answer your question, I'm trying to think of something that we had that was crazy that didn't happen. Nothing's coming to mind. Maybe something will pop in, but usually we try to make the things happen that we come up with.
Yeah. So with this latest album, around the world, there are vinyl production issues.
Yeah.
Was there a significant delay for this record?
We'll be back after these messages.
Hey there, I gotta tell you about the Groove Washer. Not because I have to, but because I want to. The Groove Washer is the best record cleaner you can get. And if you have a vinyl collection, you need to keep it clean. Dirt and dust lead to groove wear, which affects the sound and value of your record collection. Use the Groove Washer to clean before each play, and your ears and future pocketbook will thank you. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store, or go direct to groovewasher.com and use promo code VinylGuide10 at checkout. Groove Washer is a great holiday gift. Why not send one to a friend? groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10. Do it now. And all record nerds want to hear about AudiofileUSA.com, the family-owned and operated online record shop that's been in business over 30 trustworthy years. AudiofileUSA.com only sells excellent and near-mint vinyl records, only in tip-top quality for your turntable. And with over 42,000 titles, you're sure to find a bunch on your want list at AudiofileUSA.com. Audiophile vinyl is not just for the elite. Everyone can enjoy the gold standard of sound at AudiofileUSA.com. Search by title, genre, label, dig and find the deals at AudiofileUSA.com, home of the Holy Grails.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
With this latest album,
Yeah.
around the world there are vinyl production issues.
Yeah.
Was there a significant delay for this record?
Well, there wasn't a delay, but what we had to do was we had to submit masters much earlier in the process than we would normally.
Mm-hmm.
So with this record, actually, so Dream Theater was on tour in 2020, the beginning of the year, and we were supposed to continue touring. But obviously the pandemic hit and our tour stopped in February. And then we were kind of like, everybody was shut down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did a solo album, and my first one in 15 years. That was, so great to be able to do, and talk about like all of the moving parts and pieces having to culminate with a release date, and doing that when I'm the record label, and the both learning curve and empowerment that brings was intense, but it was awesome.
You're the head of the record label and the intern and the janitor.
Yeah. It was awesome. It was intense. But anyway, and then we did over the summer, I got together with Mike Portnoy, our ex Dream Theater drummer, and Jordan and Tony Levin, and we did Liquid Tension Experiment, which that was a record that was 22 years since the last one.
Mm-hmm.
So that brought us to, the fall. And again, there was no touring, nothing. So Dream Theater was like, well, we're not just going to sit around like waiting, like let's go into the studio. So it was October of last year. We went in not really knowing when this record we were working on was going to come out, just kind of like, let's see what happens. It could be a year from now, and it actually ended up coming out a year later.
Okay.
But even with that, even with the, let's see what happens, we don't know when we're going to be on tour again. All of a sudden, like pressure of delivering vinyl, it came right up. Like, we had finished with the record the end of March, and it was the mixing started to happen. It was like, all right, we need to deliver, even though this isn't coming out to the end of October, vinyl masters need to be in, like,
right.
I forget when it was, July, you know what I mean? So thankfully we didn't encounter any delays with actually any of the three projects that I mentioned, but the lead time was,
needed to be adhered to. Right?
Yeah, really strongly. And I think it helps, Inside Out is distributed by Sony, and they have some pull there, and we're a priority at that label. So I'm sure that doesn't hurt things, but yeah, the advanced delivery was like way, way, way sooner.
Right.
And it was kind of like, to me, slightly frustrating, because I was like, why do you have to have it so soon? It's not coming out for months. Like, it's like, no, it needs to be in. And even with that, we're pushing it. I'm like, really? That's crazy. But thankfully, we had no delays, thankfully.
Are there still concerns over leaks of music? I mean, I'm sure there's concerns, but for instance, with vinyl, you have to submit that 4 to 6 months in advance, sometimes more.
Sure.
That's a much longer time that those files are out of the band's hands and out somewhere. How do you work with that?
Well, I mean, in the professional domain, nobody at a record plant, a pressing plant, is going to leak music. I mean, if they're in the business of doing that, they wouldn't be in business,
Mm-hmm.
So I think what becomes a concern is when you have to start letting go of the music for purposes of, setting up the album. So for record reviews, for interviews, people want to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's still the danger of leaking, of course, and even with that, we do, secure watermarked streams and things like that. We don't just, allow downloads, and you got to stay on it. And sometimes things get out, and, then the label has to kind of go on their internet sleuthing and take all that stuff down. But yeah, it's still a concern, not a concern. With when it's released to the professionals,
Mm-hmm.
that are making the record, because they're all part, I consider them a part of your whole team. So I'm not concerned that my mix engineer is going to leak it,
Right.
So I'm not concerned that the mastering plant is going to leak it, or the pressing plant.
Mm-hmm.
It's only those other, when it starts to go outside of the professional realm. And even with that, to be fair, most of the people in the industry, again, that are reviewing and doing
Mm-hmm.
interviews are all professionals. I mean, again, they're not in the business of like ruining things for the artists, but
Mm-hmm.
somehow stuff will get out there.
When it comes to creating an album like A View from the Top of the World, you mentioned, okay, you're not sure, what the future holds. Let's just get together and let's start recording some things. Let's not, sit on our hands. At that time, are you stockpiling songs? Like at any given point, do you have, half a dozen or more ideas, things that you're working on that you're ready to present to the band? How does that creative process start?
Sure. In this case, no. Normally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, if this was normal circumstances and we had finished a world tour, we took some time off and we knew we were going to go into the studio, such and such date. Yeah. Everybody would be stockpiling ideas. Usually they're not completed songs and stuff that I'll present, but everybody will have whatever, licks, chord progressions, drum sequences, rhythms, things, and you collect all that stuff. And when we go into the studio, we have that stuff to choose from if we want it.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of this record, we didn't do that because we weren't really planning on being in the studio. So there wasn't that anticipatory period. It was more like, we're not going to sit around doing nothing. Let's get together and write and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the other two albums I mentioned, my solo album and Liquid Tension Experiment 3, I had been stockpiling ideas for 15 years for my solo album.
Mm-hmm.
And for Liquid Tension as well, there were all these different ideas. So, but in the case of the new Dream Theater record, it's really fresh off the cuff, us together interacting in the studio.
So that's interesting because you would have I guess we're talking stockpiles. You have multiple stockpiles, something for your solo, something for Dream Theater, something Liquid Tension, possibly other projects.
Right.
How do you define, at least within yourself, whether a song or a lick or an idea is for one or any of those projects?
Sure. Well, I don't really. I kind of just all collect them in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
Unless something is like glaringly guitar instrumental, it just cries it, then I'll know what that's going to be.
Right.
And there are some things that are like that are just, I don't know, for whatever reason, just the nature of it, the lick, the riff, it's just, this is guitar solo album.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, a lot of that stuff is really interchangeable. It can be kind of used for, different purposes. And it's funny because in all three of those examples, I'm the same guitar player, but they all sound different. You know what I mean? Like my solo album, my contribution, I think, always sounds like me. I can't escape that.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
So there's my personality in all three, but because of the settings and the players, they all sound different.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So Liquid Tension doesn't sound like my solo album. Dream Theater doesn't sound like Liquid Tension. And it's really interesting how that happens, because you're the same person, but you almost like you're reacting differently, or you're doing things creatively a little bit differently based on who you're with and what the process is like. And, with my solo album, it's just me. I'm just by myself on the engineer. And I'm like, okay, where am I going to go next? I don't know, wherever I feel like it. Let me try this. With Liquid Tension, it's a very fast moving project. It happens only in a couple of weeks. It's very improvisational. We're bouncing ideas off. Okay, that's good. You kind of don't think about it too much. It has a little bit of a jazz element, a lot of improv. And in Dream Theater, that's a whole nother story. You have like a whole history, 14 other studio albums before this 15th, 36 years of a band being together and touring the world, and all of our, own inherent mythology and lore that goes behind us being Dream Theater all gets filtered into the album we're making. So, and those other two projects are instrumental. This is the vocal album. So yeah, it comes out differently, and each one ends up sounding like its own thing. Dream Theater sounds like Dream Theater. My solo albums sound like me. It's weird.
Do you write music, the piece more or less end to end, or is it kind of like Lego blocks, like, oh, here's a section, here's a small bit, and then let's fit them together somehow? Yeah,
it's more Lego blocks. It's kind of like it's like building a house in a way, like you go into it. Let's say you have an idea. Let's say it's some sort of motif or something, or even a concept of what type of song you want to write. You start with that. And then as soon as you start to put ideas down and build them with the guys, it'll sort of grow itself, and it'll come into focus as the song develops. Right. It's for the most part, it's a linear process where things kind of happen once after the next, after the next, after the next. Every once in a while, a part that you wrote on a certain day gets thrown out or saved for later, or something gets moved. That's the beauty of digital editing, where you can shift things around and move things around and stuff like that. But it's very different than like singer-songwriter, where you're just kind of writing the whole thing at once and you're playing it, strumming, singing it, and that's the song.
The way I look at the material that you guys create is they are large. They're almost symphonic, right?
I was going to say that. You took the words out of my mouth. It's very much,
they're telling a story. But at some point when you're telling the story, building something like that organically, it has its positive elements. You have the element of surprise and new ideas, but you also have the potential to build a car like the Homer. You seen The Simpsons where Homer builds his own car?
Right.
How do you avoid building a Homer?
Well, sometimes you don't. I think that there's a lot of awareness. Let's just take Dream Theater, for example, in this setting, where there's five guys. There's stuff are bounced back and forth and off of each other, and so people we all know when something is really happening and really cool, and when something isn't, because there's like checks and balances there.
Right.
And even if you're like so into it that you think it's the best thing, there's a guy that's like, what? I'm telling you, man, I'm not feeling that. You have that process. I'm in these cases, I'm producing the band as well. So I have to make sure that I'm like, I can kind of walk in and out of that headspace, and be the guitar player and writer, but also be the producer and like make sure that what we're doing doesn't turn into the Homer. And there's also other people involved. There's our recording engineer. The mix engineer comes in later, but they can also be helpful. So I think kind of having a teamwork mentality helps with that. Because it does create, people have different perspectives. And again, something that you think is great might not be hitting somebody so great. And I've said this recently, but one of the things I learned as a producer is to kind of really be open to listening to people's feedback in that way. There are some decisions that you need to make and you need to make happen and you need to be the final say on. And there's also, you need to have the ability to be like, I don't agree with what he's saying, but maybe there's some truth to it that, that I'm not seeing, and in the cases where I didn't listen, it'll usually come back to bite me in the ass, and I'll be like, I think they were right. So that's important too. So the teamwork mentality, and listening to each other, and the checks and balances that environment, brings, I think is important.
Yeah.
I suppose you can get, you're probably more in danger in the case of like with something like my solo album, where there isn't that. It's just you and you're doing your thing, and it's all on you. And if you build a homer, nobody's telling you not to.
Yeah. Well, you're the one that kind of lives and dies by the solo work. But when you come to something like Dream Theater, there's the whole band, there's the organization, there's the legacy, there's all sorts of things that kind of lead up to it. So I guess, so it sounds like it's important to have input from all angles, and for the person at the helm to be, I guess, humble and open enough to take that feedback. But at the end of the day, a decision has to be made, and they can't all be zingers, right? They can't.
No, they can't. Right, exactly. So you have to show leadership, but at the same time, really be open-minded and listen. And you mentioned there's a legacy too. That's another thing, is you have things to compare your work to over the years. You know what I mean? You kind of have experience as to what worked, what didn't work, what you thought was so great and ended up being mediocre, and what you didn't realize would be so awesome. And then every time you play it live, the whole place goes nuts. So you have that history that kind of goes into it too. And that helps as well. Like, guys, we've made this mistake before. We're not going down that path, or, oh man, I know this is going to be a killer section based on our experience on the stage. And
how do you avoid getting too influenced by the past or even another album while you're writing a piece? Do you limit the sort of music you're listening to make sure you're not too influenced by a particular genre or artist as you go into that writing cycle?
Yeah, I do that. I personally do that. I don't really listen to other stuff. In the past, we've actually purposely listened to other stuff to try to, like, I remember when we were doing our first concept album, which was Scenes from a Memory. And it was first time as a prog band, we were doing a concept album. We had like our own pressure of like, okay, if before this there existed Tommy and The Wall and Operation Mindcrime, this can't suck. Like this has to be, as good as we can possibly make it. So we used those records as inspiration and kind of reacquainted ourselves with what worked on those things. But, for the most part, I sort of shut down any outside stuff because it is dangerous. Things could seep in, that you don't realize that happened to. Sometimes it could be a positive thing, if it's your own music, like, and you're sort of reconnecting with something that you used to do. Like, just for an example, we've been around, we started in 1985. So do the math. So this is our 15th studio album. And the last 2 tours that we did, we celebrated with these major anniversaries of 2 of our, 2 really special albums in our career. One was Images and Words, our second album, that kind of put us on the map. And one was Scenes from a Memory that I just mentioned, our first concept album. And they're both fan favorites. And we celebrated those records over the last couple of tours by playing them in their entirety. So by doing that, and then going into the studio when we did last year, that stuff was kind of fresh on our minds. We sort of reacquainted ourselves with writing from, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and how we did things. And I think married that and re-embraced that, but combined it with where we are now and the things that we learned, like on the last album, which were really special and really cool. And so with the new album, it was an example of like where taking inspiration from your own history, where I think worked out in a positive way. Right. So to me, the new album doesn't mimic or, imitate or sound like those albums I mentioned, but there is a vibe, there's a spirit, and there's something, a lot of reaction I'm getting from people is, even 15 albums in, this sounds like you guys are as fresh and passionate about what you do as ever. Like, how do you do that? So that's like a great, awesome compliment that somebody can pay you as a creative person, that you're not stagnant, you're not stale, and I love that, because that's our attitude.
Do you worry about that? Do you worry about that? Like repeating yourself or stagnating?
I don't worry about stagnating. I worry about, to me, things need to excite me in order for me to be excited about presenting it, to the world. So we're sort of like our own, we're pretty good editors of ourselves. Like you know what I mean? If we're listening to something and it's not blowing us away, or we're not like, oh my God, that's the best thing, then it's other people probably won't be either.
Yeah.
Because we're a fan of this style of music, and, we're all players, and everybody still loves practicing and playing and writing and listening to, great music. So it's like, if it's not exciting us, then it's not going to excite other people. So I wouldn't say that's a fear, but it's like more of like a focus.
Certainly an awareness of what that other side could be. But
an awareness.
This new album, it does sound fresh. It sounds absolutely amazing. The first song,
thank you.
The Alien, I sat down to listen to the whole album, and I ended up listening to The Alien about 6 times.
Oh no.
It's like, wow. dear Lord, what is going on here? This is
great. Right.
With all that history, is there a dream theater archive where all the master tapes, all the artwork, everything resides? Is that all filed away somewhere? Is that kind of scattered throughout different houses and offices? How do you guys track your legacy?
Yeah, it's a bit scattered. We have, over the past few years, tried to get more of a handle on that. And, because there are multiple record labels during that process over the years. So it's like, drives exist in certain places that you're not really sure where they are or what happened to them. It sounds kind of weird, and so we've been actually in the process over the past 5 years or so of trying to like really stay on top of getting everything in one place. We have a headquarters that we built a few years ago. And that's part of the process, is making sure that we have the drives and backup drives and things. And sometimes it has to do with like individual people in the band. Like, for example, when Mike Portnoy was in the band, we started the band together, and he was in the band for 25 years, and his headspace, just as a person, was he's like a collector, and like he's so organized with all his stuff. So during those years, like he had all that stuff. Like he'll have original artwork, original things, files, things. He was so good at doing that. And but over the years, you kind of like, if you're not that type of person, or if there's nobody heading that part of the Dream Theater organization up,
right,
it's so interesting, like where things can happen. I just got a call yesterday from our engineer, and he was going through drives that we had of a dramatic turn of events. And he's like, yeah, I have these drives here and everything. And it's like, there's 3 songs on the master drives that don't have vocals on them. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. I'm like, obviously there are vocals on them because they're on the record and they exist. So it's kind of like, okay, well, we have these drives. 3 of the songs don't have vocals on them. Where are the master drives? Now, this is a different record label. So does the record label have copies of these? Does the mixing studio where it was mixed have the drives, and maybe they never got sent back to the band, or so there's an organizational element to that that really needs to be and should be stayed on top of, and sometimes really isn't so well.
Yeah.
And then you got to go back and play catch up and kind of figure, well, where is this thing? And it could be an album from 20 years ago. And you're like, I don't know. I don't know where that is. I don't know who has it. It's like a weird thing.
We had the guy on, his name is Greg Brooks. He was on the show a couple years ago. He manages the Queen archive. So
Gotcha.
we were asking him about all the master tapes. They look after master tapes, video pictures, stage wear, all sorts of things. Even like tour, like shirts in Japan in '78. Here's what was the merch, that sort of thing. Is that the sort of effort that you guys are putting together with the Dream Theater archive?
Yeah, we have again our headquarters that we built where it's one place where everything can kind of live. I mean, not only where we can make records now, but where everything could be stored and organized and stuff. So we're on top of that more than we've been. And it's amazing some of the things that you find, all of a sudden there's a trunk of t-shirts from you're like, where did these come from? So more and more we're getting on top of that. In retrospect, it would have been great if like from the beginning, one person was assigned, whatever. Like, so you knew from the very first album, and things changed over the years too. I mean, when we first started, the masters were on reels, and then eventually it's switched over to digital, and they were on drives.
Is there anything missing that you're like, oh God, I'm really worried about?
Probably. Well, I can't find these vocals on that album right as of now. It exists somewhere, but we'll get to the bottom of it. But yeah, that happens sometimes. You're like, well, where is the I mean, the interesting thing too, if you think about original art and stuff like that, where it came from. I mentioned the album Images and Words. And that album we were on Atco Records at the time. It came out in 92. We weren't sort of like, we were a young band. We weren't in charge of our destiny, really. We were a young band on a label. And it wasn't at a time where everybody was walking around with iPhones and laptops and trading files on Dropbox and WeTransfer. The art was at the label. I don't know, on somebody's computer, I guess. Like,
right.
Where are the original art files from that album? I have no idea, And if you try to go back to, again, sleuth it out, okay, well, let's go back. Who was the label? Who was this, the distributor? It was Warner, and then go to this person. And thankfully, like, we have people in management that take that role and try to figure these things out, because I wouldn't know where to begin with some of this stuff.
Try to find that old Dell laptop from 2002.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where is this? Where is the actual, where are the files from this album that came out in 1994? Where do they exist? It's not, again, now, I have all that stuff just on my laptop, because Hugh, when he's done, he'll send me the master, and like, I have drives and everything. But yeah, from back then, it's confusing. Yeah.
So look, John, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking records and getting a bit nerdy with
I love
us
it.
here. I got a couple of final questions here.
Yeah.
Vinyl related. Liquid Tension Experiment.
Yeah.
The 98, 99 records are highly, highly collectible. I don't know if you know what's going out there on the market, but they're
I don't.
$300 to $500 for the vinyl version.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, any discussion, any ideas about potentially reissuing those one day?
Not currently. That's interesting that you bring it up. Again, with that, different record label. It would be the type of thing where we'd have to get our hands on the masters, and then I'm not even sure as far as any, legal ownership of that, who, if we would be able to do it. Like, it's interesting. I think it would be cool. I think it would be cool to get the masters recut and re-release that stuff on vinyl. It'd be pretty awesome. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not something we have really talked about. With Liquid Tension Experiment, it's a project. Like, we're a band, but we're not an ongoing band. So there's not like a central management, or what I mean. Yeah. So to do something like that, I mean, we'd all have to kind of get together and say, listen, we want to do this. Let's figure out how to make this happen. It's a great suggestion. And I might even bring it up to the guys and see if anybody's interested, but it would be a process.
But the fact that it's likely a long ways off just shot those records up by another 20%.
That's right. Even with that, it's like, again, then what label would that be on?
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope at least one day we get to see those records back in print. John, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to remind folks the new Dream Theater album, A View from the Top of the World, is magnificent. It's out on streaming services right now. You can order the vinyl. You may get yours before John does, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. Most people have them already.
Go to your local independent record store. Ask them for this. I know it's here in Australia, Utopia Records. You could, of course, go to dreamtheater.net. There's plenty of ordering options up there. Or better yet, just go to your local independent record shop and shake them down. They need your business anyway. John, I'd love to have you back on someday so we could talk about Rush, Iron Maiden, and Zappa. So one of these days we'll have you back on. Let's talk about some of those musical influences. Thank you again, mate.
Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, there we go. Mr. John Petrucci of Dream Theater. Thank you so much for coming on the show, John. Everyone, make sure you check out the new Dream Theater album, A View from the Top of the World. It's available on all streaming services right now. You can run to your local record shop and grab a physical copy as well. Just start off with that song, The Alien. It's incredible. It sets the stage for the rest of the record, which is phenomenal. Thanks again, John, and we look forward to having you back on the Vinyl Guide soon. And that is it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you everyone who shares these episodes on social media. Share them out on your Facebook, tweet them out on Twitter. That is always appreciated. You can even leave us a positive review on iTunes or whatever platform you subscribe to podcasts on. That's a huge help as well. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.